Those Space People, a podcast series of casual cosmic conversations with people working on exciting space projects. Welcome to Bridging the Gap, brought to you by Women in Aerospace Europe and Those Space People. Bridging the Gap is a special series that spotlights inspirational figures from the aerospace industry, talk about the current skills gap, and provides guidance on developing skills to future-proof your career. So if you're looking to enter the aerospace industry or advancing into leadership roles, then this series is tailor-made for you. Today we are bridging the gap with Vera Pinto. Vera is a policy coordinator and equality coordinator at the European Commission and is currently based in Brussels in Belgium. Vera has a background in international relations along with a few master's degrees in political science, space law and policy, among a bunch of other certifications. So welcome to the podcast, Vera.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm super thrilled to talk to you because you have such a diverse, very interesting, unique career path. But let's talk about your current role right now, right? Your current role as a policy and equality coordinator at the EC, at the European Commission. What exactly does it entail?
I think I can say that I don't get bored on my days because I can be working on equality, diversity, and inclusion topics in a moment, and an hour after I can be talking or working on topics how the space data and services are used by other sectors and can help other sectors, especially on what concerns green and so sustainability. And I can finish my day about in discussions about making the space sector itself more sustainable and green. So it has a huge range of activities. And of course, my role involves overseeing the development and implementation of policies, in one way aiming at promoting equality, diversity, and inclusion, in the other aspect on the use of space data by other sectors, in another area about greening the space sector and making it more sustainable.
That sounds very interesting. So to get into a role like this, what kind of skills or what kind of educational background is needed?
In the European Commission, you actually need all type of skills and background and academic background. So I have a political science and I specialize myself in space policy, for example, but we also need engineers, we also need people from chemistry, physics and other areas, because in the European Commission you really deal with a huge range of policies, anything that you can think of. So the engineering, the in different areas of engineering also, because we have energy, we have chemicals, we have health policies, and we have space also. And in the space, as in all the sector of space, you need much more than just aerospace engineers. You need lawyers, you need economists, you need people to help communication people, you need people with a more diverse background that is able also to juggle between the different areas and the different policies and to make these connections. And this is a bit where I fit, precisely because of my diverse background, my diverse work experience. This brought me a unique set of tools and skills that I can apply when I'm working in all these different areas that I do in my daily job.
You mentioned sustainability as one of the areas of your job, right? Can you elaborate more on what exactly around sustainability in the space sector that you work on?
So if we focus on the sustainability of the space sector itself, you have different dimensions here. One thing is that to start with, you need to be able to measure your environmental footprint to exactly know the impacts that a space activity has on Earth and beyond Earth, right? But the majority of life cycle assessment methodologies specifically designed for activities on Earth. So just there, we already are quite unique because we do have activities beyond Earth boundaries. And then on top of it, you don't have a sector-specific methodology that really allow us to do these calculations. What you have is that you have guidelines, you have principles, but it still leaves a lot of room for interpretation and application. And so in the end, when you have two companies presenting their results, actually you are comparing apples with potatoes because those assumptions started precisely the wrong way, because they had so much margin to do their own assumptions that in the end the output is not comparable, neither possible to replicate, you see. So this is something that we are trying to change, also because this will allow to have equal playing field for everyone. This way, we know exactly uh, the environmental footprint of A or B, and we know exactly how is it measured, is calculated in the same way, following the same assumptions, using the same type of data. In the end, you will compare oranges with oranges. And why this is very important, and I know this sounds very basic, the why we are measuring it in the same way. One, because in Europe we are taking a lot of action on what concerns sustainability and avoiding false green claims. And then when you are looking also at this transition, this green and digital transition of the sectors that our sector also needs to do, we also talk about access to finance this necessary change. And one of the baselines for this is precisely your environmental performance of your project, or your estimate environmental performance of your project. So if you compare potatoes with oranges, you can actually end up, when you go to your investors, the investor might actually be investing in a project that is really not the best choice on what concerns environmental performance. So there's this need to ensure this common language that everyone knows exactly what the rules that we are playing, and it's clear not only for the sector but also for the others that need to interact with us, space sector. So part of my job is actually currently doing this. And if for those who follow the activities of the European Commission in this regard, you will see that 2 weeks ago we opened precisely a call for a procurement to start developing this methodology. And this methodology is actually developed together with industry and the sector stakeholders. So this is not us imposing, is us facilitating a consensus where we all agree on how this common language needs to look like. And if you look at the spirit of the European Union, that is precisely about us building consensus and bringing all our plus and cons together, and with that make something that is useful for everyone. I think this methodology represents well the spirit of the European Union, because this is exactly how it's going to work and how it's going to be implemented. And of course, this makes me also work precisely with the sustainable finance framework to ensure that the sector has access to this finance to promote this transition, to support this change of processes, of means. I work with other colleagues that work more on the R&I part. So when we are talking about developing new alternative materials to replace those that we use in space that we know that they are not that sustainable or green. So we also need to have this connection to make sure that everything is okay. Also, for example, when we talk about access to space, and for example, let's now finance a more sustainable launcher. But you need to have very concrete criteria on how you're going to evaluate if A or B is more sustainable or not. So this methodology would also help to better define this criteria and to ensure that we are using the taxpayer money really to finance the more sustainable, the more environmental friendly solution. And so this is a bit what we are working. Sometimes it sounds more exciting than what it is in reality. Sometimes it's very bureaucratic, but at the same time, it's also very exciting actually, because if we do this, we are actually, and I do believe that it's not going to be easy, yeah, but it's also not rocket science, so it's not that difficult. You already have a lot of companies that are working on this, so it's a question really just to put everyone speaking the same language, and if we pull and share, I do believe that this is doable. And we did some consultations also with the stakeholders to evaluate if this was doable or not. So we know that it's possible. I think everyone agrees that there's this need. And I do believe that we succeed on this, we will change substantially the way that we do space activities and how we interact with the environment around us on Earth, but also in the environment in orbit. Because, for example, one impact category that we will need to have on assessing the life cycle assessment is precisely in orbit environment.
And this sounds very interesting, because being more responsible of our own actions is definitely the need of the hour for everyone on this planet and perhaps beyond. So you talked about these methodologies that will eventually come into place, and followed by maybe a set of guidelines or regulations that are agreed upon by everyone. So when all this keeps evolving or gets matured, what kind of new roles do you see getting introduced in the space industry? Do you see more environmentalists, for example, stepping in I don't know, do you see every startup or any company having these, I don't know, green roles as part of their team? Or yeah, how do you see that happening?
I think that these environmental concerns, they already exist. I remember a few years ago, just before a launch of Thomas Pesquet to the International Space Station, there was an environmental NGO requesting publicly to not have it because of the environmental impact of the launcher itself. And even with some data gaps that exist today in terms of science that is not as evolved, characterization models that are not as evolved as they should be, we know already that actually the hotspots are not really linked to the launchers, but more actually to the ground activities that we have. And then if you think about the resources that we use, you use land because you have the ground infrastructure, you have the energy, you have water, you have the critical raw materials that we use and the cost of extraction of them. There's other areas that actually might have a higher level of environmental impact than others. So I think that one, by start having this methodology, this common language, and making sure that everyone reports accordingly would also help to some myth busting and debunking related to the environmental impacts of space activities. So I think that will also be extremely interesting to make sure also that the public opinion has really an evidence-based opinion on the environmental impacts and what should be done or not. Of course, then we can argue about other things, about the benefits, so the handprint, so the benefits of the space activities, and that is undeniable, that is way higher than the footprint. But still, that doesn't mean that we cannot do better, right? So we need to think about that too. And then, of course, I also believe that with this green transition, so becoming more sustainable, it also brings more business opportunities and innovation and job creation. And so this is not neglectable. We are talking about merging two worlds, the environmental engineering with the space engineering, right? So this is a new set of skills that we will need to have in Europe and in the world, precisely if we want to be serious about this green transition of the sector and be in more sustainable activities. You already have some people in Europe that has this matchmaking of skills, but of course, with us taking action and fostering for a faster transition and a faster change in the sector, that means that we also need to ramp up in that side. And of course, it leaves the door open, for example, for startups that combine these two set of skills to provide advice to the other sector and to advise them how to better improve eco design and how to apply the circular economy principles to our sector. Because sometimes we tend to think, economy circles circular economy principles to the space sector. We cannot recycle satellites. Yes, we cannot recycle satellites, but we do have a lot of equipment on Earth that becomes obsolete. And for us becomes obsolete, but maybe it's not obsolete for other sectors that can reuse that, and instead of sending it to the garbage, it can be used by that. The way that we do our waste management, the way that we spend our energy. Usually you say that garbage is someone else's treasure, and this can also be applied to us. So, and trying to understand precisely how we can into the extent possible, apply these circular economy principles, apply eco design, apply LCA practices to the space sector, also brings and opens the door to new opportunities, not only for new jobs, new types of jobs in the sector itself, but also for new business, consulting business, support business, maybe even new technologies, new processes, new materials that can make a little revolution on how we do things today. And space sector is known as being out of the box. So this is actually another stream of being out of the box and go beyond and change paradigms. We have so much technology and so much materials that were developed precisely for the space sector and were spin off to other sectors. Maybe we can also have other things from other sectors that we can spin into our sector and change the way that we do things. So for me, I see it as an opportunity, a challenging opportunity, but still an opportunity.
Absolutely. That's what space is all about, right? Dreaming up the impossible and then achieving it. So now that you mentioned new technologies, new advancements can also help the whole sustainability discussion in space. Do you see AI in any form already impacting or impacting the efforts towards sustainability right now or in the near future?
I think the most obvious example of AI in space is, for example, on processing Earth observation data. We collect so many terabytes per day about Earth observation data. We collect so much data per day. It's humanly impossible to process everything in due time. So I think artificial intelligence there really can have a huge contribution to make also the products more tailor-made to the end user and faster. And it can actually, if it is properly done, it can even mean a democratization on the access of Earth observation data and the way that is used. Because what is happening now is you need to have certain layers of processing the data that is only a few that can actually do that until it reaches the end user, so the person that is actually using the data. So if you start implementing and using this artificial data, you will be able to do more and faster, and at the same time making it accessible even to more people that today is not accessible. So in that regard, I don't see artificial intelligence itself as a bad thing. I usually say the technology is not the problem; it's the use that you give to technology that makes it a problem or not. And it's a bit the same principle. So even if we look at the upstream, space upstream, and the digitalization of the sector itself, and using artificial intelligence in our processes, in computing data and algorithms and calculating routes, especially if you're talking like, let's go to Mars. Come on, we don't go to the moon already for God knows how long. And we had people doing the calculations by hand. So can you imagine the potential of actually having now artificial intelligence doing those calculations in seconds? And there it is. Of course, there will be a journey until you can rely on those calculations 100%. AI also needs to be trained for that, but still it can help you with prediction models, it can help you with processing data. I see potential in doing that. And again, for me the problem is not the technology itself, is the use that you give to technology. And I do believe that we can still use artificial intelligence for good reasons and good ends. So I actually think that we should do it more. At least we should explore more how we could integrate AI in our work and the way that we process stuff.
Absolutely. AI definitely plays an amazing role in data processing. There's a lot of edge computing that AI can do. And at the end of the day, we might not even need to downlink a lot of imagery from the satellite, right? At the end of the day, what we need is insights from this imagery. We no longer need people printing out these images and looking at these maps and then coming up with these insights. AI can just say, hey, blah, 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 blah is happening, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. I'm also a huge proponent of using AI. I was wondering if AI can also help us in this whole making space more sustainable, trying to, for example, in the kind of work that you said you are doing right now at the European Commission, in trying to figure out a lot of these methodologies, trying to work with other companies. Do you think AI could help us there?
I must say that I don't know any case until today of the use of AI to perform a life cycle assessment, for example. But I do believe that it's not impossible, because actually what takes a lot of time and cost in performing a life cycle assessment. So a life cycle assessment, it has multiple impact categories, and we'll tell you precisely this, is the collection of data and processing the data. So of course, the collection, the data, if you put everyone collecting the same way, the same type of information, that already reduces a lot of the burden. But you still need to do all the calculations, and that takes a lot of time, and it has multiple validation roles. So there, for example, AI can make the process faster, but also cheaper. If we are there yet, I don't think so, but it doesn't mean that in 5 years we might not be at that stage. So once we create a baseline database and data sets, for example, it would be easier to create the algorithm for AI just to analyze a project and give you at least a preliminary result and forecast on how the environmental footprint would look based on those requirements. And again, it would reduce the costs a lot. That is not unneglectable, but I don't think we are there yet. We will need still to wait a few years to see that part. If you look at the downstream part and the processing of data, again, coming back to the Earth observation processing data, that should also be able to allow you to have some forecasts and planning. And if the moment that you process data, think about climate adaptation and climate mitigation risks. AI could actually process all that data and provide you some forecasts on how it's going to look like. And it must faster. So if you have sometimes you have natural disasters that are quite unpredictable, but you have 7 minutes to know where is going to hit. So can artificial intelligence do all that processing in, I don't know, 2 minutes, so that we have 5 minutes to send an alert to the population? And maybe that is really the future, and why not explore it? And come on, not even the universe is the limit to us, so why are we limiting ourselves in the way that we do this? And for example, when you talk about space sustainability, think about in orbit and the collision with all the debris monitoring, etc., that we need to have this collision avoidance and all these calculations. If AI could make that even more precise, even more in time, for example, it would be extremely essential to protect the space assets. So that's another area that could be worthwhile exploring, I think.
Absolutely. Circling back a little bit to the skill set, right? Can you talk about what kind of educational backgrounds or what kind of professional experiences do your colleagues at the European Commission come from who work on similar projects like you do?
We do, again, like I said, we do have all different types of profiles. For example, on this greening the space sector in particular, development of methodology, I have colleagues that I'm in contact with in other DGs. They are experts in life cycle assessment, environmental engineering, these type of things. PhD, sometimes some of them even with more than one PhD. I really admire them because already one PhD is tough, imagine two. But you also have engineering background, so aerospace engineering, telecommunication engineering. We also have lawyers. You have more generalistic lawyers, and you have others that are experts in space law, for example, specifically here in the GTF, because we do work with a lot of these aspects. The same way you can have economists. For example, one of the things that every time we put a new legislation proposal forward, for example, we have to do what is called an impact assessment. And our colleagues economists, they are our best friends when we need to do this, because this actually implies measuring and quantifying the impacts and the benefits. And so their economists' brain and know-how is extremely important to do this. So there are things that I don't dare to enter. There's someone who knows how to do it, so let's just ask him. He knows better than I do. You also, for example, in the frame of other regulations, think about the REACH regulation, for example, is one that we are also bound by, that is linked to the use of chemicals, and with whom we are in contact with the colleagues. The majority of colleagues working there, they have a legal or a chemist background. So it really depends. We really need all different types of profiles in the European Union, because we do touch anything that you can think of. So we have doctors, we have farmers, we have aerospace engineers, we economists, lawyers. I remember we had an expert, some colleague that stayed with us for some time. He was astrophysicist, expert in quantum physics. See, so I have a friend of mine. Well, she's a friend. We don't work together, but she works also in institutions. She's a nuclear physicist, and her PhD is in astrophysics and nuclear energy. So we really need all different type of profiles. If someone is thinking in joining the European Commission or the European Union institutions, and is thinking, because I'm an engineer or a chemist or professional in tourism area, it doesn't fit me, wrong. We do need those type of profiles to work with us.
That sounds pretty cool. And having farmers on board is quite amazing. Wow. And what's the typical career path for these different people from these different backgrounds who join the European Commission?
It depends. So you know that you have different paths to join the career in the European Union. You have different institutions. So I will focus more on the European Commission because it's the one that I know best. For example, twice a year we receive what is called the Blue Book trainees. That is basically a paid internship where any type of background can choose what we call a director general, so basically a policy area that they would like to work on, and inside that director general, which units they want to work on, if in communication, if coordination, if international relations, etc. And so sometimes that's a way to get in, is at least to have a bit of the flavor and the experience. This doesn't have any age limit whatsoever. The only condition is that you have a degree, basically. And of course, if you want to have a permanent stay or a longer stay, you have two ways: what we call the temporary contract, that is a contract agent or a temporary agent. So this means that is a non-permanent post where you need to do you make an application. It's open. If you go to epso.eu, you can see all the vacancies that are there. You need to do an exam, an interview, and if everything was okay, you sign a contract. But it has a temporal stamp. So it means that after a certain number of years, you cannot continue with that type of contract. Then another one is the permanent contracts is what we call the officials. And here you can also apply for it. And the process there is a bit long. And then you have competitions that we call the generalist. So it means you don't need to have a specific profile. You can just apply for it. And then you have also a series of exams, interviews, etc. And then if you succeed, you are what we call a reserve list. And then you have the experts competitions, where usually it requires a certain number of years of experience in a certain field. So 2 years, for example, there was a competition open for the area of space and defense that was specifically targeting for the GDFE, but not only, because we do have colleagues, experts in space, working in DG agriculture, for example, and on the use of Earth observation for agriculture, for example. So it's not exclusive, but it means that when you reach that reserve list, any service of the European Commission can actually hire you. So it's like a pre-selection base that is done, and then you do an interview, and any service in the European Commission can ask you to work for. And those experts, usually you need a certain number of years to be able to apply, or work experience. It can vary. In these last years, we had a few experts competitions. So we had for space, we had for defense, we had for transport, environmental policies also, for example. So there's really a huge range. But it's really a question of paying attention to the epso.eu website, where usually all the vacancies are published, both for permanent and non-permanent positions. And we are always needing technical profiles. So again, we do not discriminate. We really need absolutely everyone. And when I say I do not discriminate, is also meaning that our competitions are open and recruitment process is open to absolutely everyone, equal opportunities. If it is a person with disabilities, for example, he can ask for reasonable accommodation to ensure that he has the required equity to perform the exams and the interviews, etc. And so in that regard, we are very open.
And to students or young enthusiasts who are looking to enter the space industry, what would your advice be?
That's very curious. When I started thinking and working in space, I was in Portugal in a time that space was not that popular as it is today there. And on top of it, I'm not a technical person. So everyone was like, you want to do diplomacy with aliens kind of thing. And I think what is important is, if you really want to work in this, just start asking questions about what is necessary. If you have a specific profile, if you would like to reach out to a professional that is already working in the area, a tutor that could assist you, or a mentor that could assist you in defining a career path and a way to achieve your goal. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So this is also very important, because as a marathon, there will be moments that you will feel like, what I'm doing with my life, I just want to give up. Eyes on the prize. You will hear a lot of no's along the way. You will have some small victories along the way too. So make sure that you celebrate the small victories, and make sure that you learn and take some lessons on exercises from the no's, because the no's will help you to improve. And your next pitch will be better because you got that no. So a no, I know that people are always very negative about a no, and it is very frustrating. I can relate to that, and been there, done that. But it's also a learning opportunity, because if you got a yes at the first time, it meant that you did everything right from the start. So you didn't learn nothing new from there. If you get a no, it means, okay, but what could I have done different? What could I have said different? What am I missing on my CV? And so this is also important. I think also networking is also extremely important, precisely because it will give you this overview of what are the skills necessary. And sometimes it's more important for certain positions, it's more important the soft skills than actually the hard skills. And if that is the case, okay, hard skills you can learn at university with a degree, etc. But the soft skills sometimes is a bit more tricky, but you can still work on them and develop them. And sometimes the soft skills is even more important than the hard skills to be able to sell yourself in a good way, okay? Sell yourself in a job interview or when you have an opportunity, because suddenly you are in an elevator with a CEO and he's actually friendly and you can pitch to him how good you are and how much you would like to work with him. Have you ever thought in preparing? What would you say to a CEO if you have 30 seconds in an elevator to sell yourself as you have to hire me? So doing this type of mental exercises and games is also quite important. And having someone that can assist you in preparing that speech and giving you some hands-on, maybe not that wording, maybe phrase it in a different way, enhance your public speaking skills, help you elaborating, writing a motivation letter that is remarkable, or helping you preparing your CV, for example, or guiding you on where I can go to develop these soft skills. Now, for example, I usually tend to advise to, if you need to improve your public speaking skills, go to Toastmasters. That's a good spot for you to learn how to improve your public speaking skills, and how to pitch and to adjust your speech to the audience. Because honestly, 60% of any job is about how you communicate to others, how clear you communicate to others, how convincing you communicate to others. And this is a soft skill. It's not really a hard skill. And you learn how to do that. Anyone can learn how to do that. So I might be too old to learn how to launch rockets to space, but it's never too old how to learn how to communicate and improve your communication. So I think if someone is starting, I think starting by developing the soft skills and to seek some guidance on some advice, right? Doesn't need to be set in stone, but to understand a bit better how to reach points from going from point A to point B, and to keep the motivation. Again, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Especially when we hit the wall and we are about to give up. This is a moment that is extremely important to also have someone next to our sides that keep us moving and keep us running and keep cheering for us.
Absolutely. It's always helpful to have an elevator pitch ready. I completely agree with that. And you've given that's really some fantastic advice. I think it also applies in general to life, right? Because life is a marathon. So it's wonderful advice. And you know what? Actually, diplomacy with aliens sounds very interesting. I'd love to be on board when we actually get there.
I must share this. Many years ago, I was the only person from social science in a stargazing event in Portugal many years ago. And funny enough, it was when Portugal changed to euro, and the conversion is actually very easy to do. But in a room full of engineers and mathematics and scientists, it was the social science lady that was able to do the conversion like this. And I impressed so much one of the speakers that I had one of his books, and he autographed it. He gave me an autograph saying, "To Vera, our future ambassador in Mars." Many years later, I was already in Brussels. That person became actually the minister responsible for space in Portugal. And I met him, and it was very funny because I went to Lisbon, and he was on the airplane from Brussels to Lisbon also. So I gave him one of my cards, and in the back I wrote, "From Vera, the ambassador for Mars." And he waited for me at the end of the flight. When we landed, he waited and said, "I still remember you." And this was like 20 years ago. It's Even if you are an alien in the middle of a room, it doesn't mean that you are wrong. It just means that you have a different perspective. And so embrace that different perspective, because that is the added value that you can bring to a team and to a room, and sell it as something, as your advantage in compared to everything else.
That is so very true, Vera, because being an engineer myself and having come from a family of engineers, an engineer's perspective can get very boring. So it's always so amazing to have diverse perspectives, like you said, people with diverse backgrounds in the space industry, and that's what we really need. Because at the end of the day, what's really taking space or the space industry forward, the diversity in the sector is what's taking it forward. So thank you so much, Vera. You've shared some incredible insights and told us all about how to work with the European Commission, and a lot about the careers around space policy and sustainability. And thank you so much for your time, and thanks for the insights.
Thank you so much.